a man stands on a burning shore. He wears a crimson cape. A gold medallion hangs from his chest. Behind him, 17 ships, soldiers, priests, war dogs straining at their chains. In front of him, lashed to a palm tree, 2 people. A warrior, his chest bare, his eyes turned toward a sky filling with smoke. A pregnant woman, bound at the wrists, trembling not from cold, but from something she has no word for yet. Something that arrived on the water and has not stopped killing since. The man in the crimson cape does not look at them. He simply points. His name is Christopher Columbus. The year is 1492, and what he is pointing at is not a treasure, not a landmark, not a destination. He is pointing at people and deciding they are property. Here is the number your history teacher never wrote on the board: 8 million. That is how many Taino people lived on this island when Columbus arrived. Within 50 years, not centuries, 50 years, fewer than 500 remained. This is not a story about discovery. This is a story about what discovery looked like from the ground, and the ground was on fire. If you've never heard this version of history, the real one, told through the people who lived it and the men who documented it, then you're exactly where you need to be. Hit subscribe, because every chapter of this story is going to tell you something they decided you shouldn't know, and we're just getting started. October 12, 1492. The Santa Maria cuts through calm water and a lookout screams land. When Columbus steps ashore, what he finds is not the gold-paved empire he promised the Spanish crown. What he finds is something far more beautiful, and in his mind, far more useful. The Taino people come to the shore with food, with water, with open hands. Columbus watches them and reaches for his journal. He writes that they are gentle, generous, well-built. He writes that they would make, and these are his exact words, good servants. He writes this on the same page where he describes their kindness. The island's name is Haiti, land of mountains. The Taino have called it that for centuries. Columbus crosses the name out, renames it, plants a flag in soil that belongs to people who are standing right in front of him, claims it for a queen who will never once set foot there. Before his ships leave, he selects 6 Taino men, taken without consent, and loads them onto the Santa Maria like cargo, proof of life for the Spanish crown. By the time the fleet reaches Spain, 3 of them are dead. The other 3 never see Haiti again. Columbus arrives home a hero. Crowds fill the streets of Barcelona, and in the harbor, a second fleet is already being built. Not 3 ships this time. 17. The second fleet arrives in 1493, and there is nothing gentle about it. 17 ships, 1,200 soldiers, horses, priests, and war dogs, massive, trained animals that the Spanish have already used to hunt men across other territories. Columbus steps ashore not as an explorer this time, but as a governor. The Spanish crown has given him a title and a single instruction: deliver gold. But there is a problem. The gold Columbus promised, the vast, overflowing reserves he described to the crown, barely exists. The Taino have small amounts, worn as ornament, traded casually. Nothing close to what Columbus sold to his funders. So he builds a system. Every Taino adult, man, woman, elderly, must deliver a hawk's bell filled with gold dust every 3 months. A hawk's bell, a small thing, an impossible thing in a land without enough gold to fill them. Those who arrive at the deadline empty-handed have their hands cut off at the wrist. Columbus's own men record what happens next. The severed hands are hung around the victims' necks, and they are sent back to their villages, walking warnings. Within 2 years, an estimated 50,000 Taino are dead. Columbus writes home asking for more colonists. Across the water in Cuba, a young chief named Hadwi receives the news. He has heard what happens to those who cooperate. He has already decided he never will. By 1502, Hispaniola is unrecognizable. The villages are ash. The rivers run with the blood of people who delivered their gold on time, people who converted, people who knelt and prayed in a language they didn't understand and were killed anyway. Hadwi has watched all of it, and he makes a decision that no other Taino leader has made. He runs, but not to hide, to warn. He loads hundreds of survivors into canoes and leads them across 90 miles of open water to Cuba. The moment he arrives, he calls the Cuban Taino together. He holds up a basket filled with gold ornaments, the same gold the Spanish have been cutting off hands to collect, and he says words that Spanish chroniclers actually recorded. "This is the God the Spanish worship. For this they kill us. For this they will come here too." Then he sets the basket on fire. For nearly a decade, Hadwi wages a guerrilla war against Spanish incursions into Cuba, ambushes, retreats, strategic strikes. He is the first organized resistance fighter in the recorded history of the Americas. He cannot be bought. He cannot be reasoned with. He cannot be broken. But in 1511, Spain stops sending scouts. They send an army. And ahead of that army, invisible, silent, already spreading through Hadwi's people, comes something no fighter on earth has ever learned to fight. The swords they could see coming. The dogs they could hear. The soldiers, the horses, the smoke of burning villages, these were horrors with a shape, with a sound, with a direction you could run from. But what the Spanish carried inside their bodies was something the Taino had no name for, no medicine against, no way to even understand. Smallpox arrived first, then measles, then typhus and influenza, diseases so ordinary to Europeans that soldiers didn't even know they were carrying them. But to the Taino, whose immune systems had never once encountered any of it, contact was a death sentence. Bartolomé de las Casas, a Spanish priest who was there, who watched it happen, writes of entire villages collapsing within days, people bleeding from their eyes, skin erupting in lesions so painful they couldn't be touched, children dying faster than parents could dig graves. The dying couldn't feed themselves. The healthy fled and carried the disease to the next village themselves. The Taino began calling the Spanish those who never die. Some Spanish commanders understood exactly what the sickness was doing and accelerated it deliberately. Infected individuals sent into healthy communities, contaminated materials distributed as gifts. By 1510, Hispaniola's population has fallen from 8 million to fewer than 46,000. Hadwi knows these numbers. He has watched this happen with his own eyes. Which is why what he says, when they finally catch him, will stop you cold. Bartolomé de las Casas is not an enemy of Spain. He is a Catholic priest, a landowner, a man who himself held Taino slaves under the encomienda system and considered it entirely legal, entirely normal. He arrives in Hispaniola in 1502 as a man of God and a man of the empire, and for years he is both without conflict. Then he watches something he cannot unfold from his memory. He watches Spanish soldiers make a game of it, bets placed on how many Taino bodies a single sword stroke can cut through. He watches infants torn from their mother's arms and thrown to the perros de guerra, the war dogs, animals bred and trained specifically to kill human beings. He watches pregnant women, elders, children. He watches things he will later write about in language so precise and so devastated that readers across Europe will refuse to believe a Christian man could have written it. But he did because he saw it. "I saw all the above things," he writes, "and countless others. This is not a revolutionary. This is not an activist. This is a Spanish Catholic priest writing directly to his king, and even he admits the words are not enough. Las Casas frees his slaves, books passage back to Spain, demands to stand before the crown. He has a document in his hands that will shake an empire. But first, Hadwi must burn. They find Hadwi because someone in his own camp tells them where he is sleeping. He is brought out in chains in the early morning of February 2, 1512, 10 years after he crossed 90 miles of open water to warn a people who are now dying beside him. They tie him to a stake. pile wood at his feet. And then, because this is a Christian empire and appearances matter, a Franciscan friar steps forward with one final offer. Convert, accept baptism, die a Christian and go to heaven. Hadwi looks at the friar. He asks one question: do Christians go to heaven? The friar says yes. Hadwi is silent for a long moment, long enough that every Spanish soldier present remembers it. Then he speaks his last recorded words. Then I do not want to go there. I would rather go to hell than be in the same place as such cruel people. The Spanish light the fire. He becomes the first person in the Americas executed specifically for resisting European colonialism. 5 centuries later, Cuba names a beer after him. His face covers murals across the Caribbean. The friar who offered him heaven writes down every word he said and cannot explain why. Those words reach Spain before Las Casas does. And when Las Casas finally stands before the king, what he places on that table silences an empire. When Bartolomé de Las Casas finally stands before King Charles I of Spain in 1542, he does not come with emotion alone. He comes with a document. A short account of the destruction of the Indies is not a passionate speech or a moral plea. It is a ledger. Region by region, Hispaniola, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Las Casas lists what happened with the cold precision of a man who spent decades watching it and wrote everything down. Death tolls, methods, names of places where entire populations simply ceased to exist. He writes that the Spanish carried out their massacres for no other reason than to satisfy their lust for gold and to acquire wealth in a very short time. The document lands like a stone through glass. King Charles, shaken, passes the new laws of 1542, legislation theoretically limiting indigenous enslavement across Spanish territories. It is the first time a European crown has legally acknowledged what its colonists are doing. The colonists in the Americas read the new laws and ignore them almost entirely. Las Casas spends the remaining 50 years of his life. He lives to 92, fighting a machine he once belonged to, knowing the laws exist and knowing they are not being enforced. He dies still fighting. And while he fights with words, something else entirely is consuming what remains of the Taino world. It doesn't need weapons. It only needs land. When the killing became too visible, Spain gave it a new name. The encomienda system sounds almost benevolent in its official description. Spanish landowners would be entrusted with indigenous people, responsible for Christianizing them, educating them, bringing them into civilized society. In exchange, the indigenous people would provide labor. That was the document. Here is what actually happened. Taino men are sent into gold mines so narrow they cannot stand upright, working in total darkness, breathing rock dust until their lungs give out. Women work sugar plantations from before sunrise until they cannot lift their arms. Las Casas documents the life expectancy of a mine worker, not in years, in months. Families are separated. Children are born into the system and inherit their parents' chains without ever being told a different life exists. When the Taino population collapses so completely that there are simply not enough bodies left to run the plantations, the Spanish make a decision that will echo for 400 years. They turn to West Africa. They begin purchasing and trafficking human beings across the Atlantic in numbers that will eventually reach 12 million souls. Columbus's single act of pointing, that moment on the burning shore, has now set fire to 2 continents. By 1550, the Taino are functionally extinct. The records survived, every atrocity documented, which forces the only question that matters: who decided you were never supposed to read them? Every second Monday of October, the United States celebrates a man who never set foot on its soil. There are parades, there are statues, there are school lessons that begin with 3 ships and a date and the word discovery, and end before anything inconvenient begins. Generations of children have been handed 1492 as a beginning, a triumph, a story of courage on open water. Nobody mentions what was already there. Nobody mentions what happened next. But Columbus's own journal does. He wrote in his own hand on the very first day that these people would make good servants. He wasn't surprised by what followed. He designed it. Every quota, every severed hand, every war dog, authorized by the man the parades are named after. And yet here is what survived him. The word hammock Taino, hurricane Taino, canoe, barbecue, savannah, all Taino words, living quietly inside the English language like survivors in hiding. Genetic studies of Caribbean populations today reveal Taino DNA threading through bloodlines that were told for centuries they had none. Communities across Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic are reclaiming ceremonies, languages, and names that were declared extinct. They were never gone. They were just buried under someone else's story. Now return to the image. Columbus in his crimson cape, his arm extended, his finger pointing. This time, don't look at him. Look at the two people tied to the tree, the warrior, the pregnant woman. Their names were never recorded because the man pointing never thought to ask. Columbus didn't discover a new world. He ended one, and it's time we learned its name.